Hello, BookTube. I'm back with another essay for today, and we're continuing with Claude A. Prance's The Laughing Philosopher, a further miscellany on books, booksellers, and book collecting, published in 1976 by Villiers Publications. And as usual, I will take the dust jacket off to read. And today's essay is on being parted from one's books. And he again starts with a few quotations, which I'll read first. I never knew more sweet and happy hours than I employed upon my books. James Shirley, The Lady of Pleasure. Short retirement urges sweet return. Milton, Paradise Lost. And he continues with the essay proper. It will be remembered that Napoleon had a special collection of books which traveled with him on his campaigns, prominent among which was Plutarch's Lives. Melanchthon, a man of few books, but apparently with a taste for alliteration, chose Plato, Pliny, Ptolemy, and Plutarch, while Landor traveled with one servant and one chest of books. T. Lawrence took with him in his knapsack only the Oxford Book of English Verse and the Morte d'Arthur, while another soldier had a composite volume made up by his friends from selections of his favorites, bound together into one book, a very personal anthology, although the bibliophile will shudder at the destruction of many books to make one. Those thoughts have been running through my mind because, for several reasons, I am parted from my books, at least from the greater part of them, for a few favorites travel with me. The collection of 5,000 volumes, which has taken 40 years to bring together, lies in a store in a great city until I can rehouse it in a Mediterranean island, perhaps many months hence. And he has a little asterisk for a footnote. Written in 1966, but reunion has now happily taken place. And he continues, how I miss my books. They were friends of long standing, whose company I sought daily. Now even quotations, which I thought I knew verbatim, somehow have to be verified. I know just the book and even the page on which I will find them, but the books themselves are 1,300 miles away. There was, of course, some pleasure in the preparation for parting, the sweet sorrow in choosing those few indispensable books which must travel with me. How I enjoyed sorting out those I must take, until the number became too large and I had to start all over again. Most of us, I suppose, have played the game of desert island books. The list of those volumes we should regard as essential if cast away on a deserted island. One starts with a limit of 6 volumes, then the trouble comes. We compile half a dozen lists, all different, in which the volumes are all equally necessary to our theoretical Crusoe experience. Then we say the limit must be 12 volumes instead of 6, and so it goes on. Excuse me. We even start to think of Sir John Lubbock in his 100 Best Books, and then remember Leigh Hunt, who, in choosing a library of one, was torn between Shakespeare and Spenser. If we travel as I have done to an island, then the question of bulk is of great importance. We have a wonderful time picking out the pocket editions of our favorites, usually on India paper, because, although not ideal, they are infinite riches in a little room. For this reason, I select some of the small volumes published by George Newnes and Simpkin Marshall earlier this century. The novels of Thomas Love Peacock, 958 pages, containing all 7 novels and measuring only 7 inches by 4 inches and less than 1 inch thick, a miracle of compression. Then there is Pepys' Diary, over 900 pages, the miscellaneous works of Oliver Goldsmith, 760 pages, and Charles Lamb's works, 815 pages. With this latest, I find I made a mistake. I should have brought the pocket volume of Elia, edited by E.V. Lucas, for the interesting notes. It is at this time that we turn to the World Classic series and to Everyman, for they are valuable for portability and as well as content. Anthologies, those pretty toys and time wasters, tend to figure largely in one's list. Say the Oxford Book of English Verse, or Walter de la Mare's Come Hither, of E.V. Lucas's country anthology, The Open Road. There is a lovely little India paper pocket edition. Or if one prefers it, Sir William Beach Thomas's A Countryman's Anthology, also on thin paper. Alternatively, there are anthologies of a favorite author's work to be considered, such as the Jeffreys Companion, the wonderful selection of Heine's work in Everyman's Library, or selections of the work of Hazlitt, Leigh Hunt, Thomas Fuller, or Sir Thomas Browne. Of course, it is obvious that my list extends greatly beyond the plan of a few volumes, and the half dozen which traveled in my suitcase were followed by a small box of books. So I actually have about 200 volumes with me now. Among these, I include a very slightly large reference books, such as the concise Cambridge Bibliography of English Literature, the Everyman's Dictionary of Literary Biography, and the Oxford Companion to Classical Literature, all of which make good reading apart from their reference value. When one is parted from most of one's books, some comfort is found in browsing among those books which remind one of the absent friends. For this reason, I slipped into my Mediterranean box copies of the Book Lovers Anthology and Andrew Lang's Ballads of Books, so I can still read something from my favorite books about books, and dream that I am searching the bookstalls of my choice. There is undoubtedly an element of nostalgia in such selection, and with this in mind, I include a few books about England, such as Edward Thomas's The Heart of England, and Jeffrey's book, already mentioned, and The Natural History of Selborne. Akin to these are my escapist books, and I have, therefore, a couple volumes of Trollope and Gilbert White's journals, as well as a fine paper copy of Walton's Angler. As Charles Lamb said, it would sweeten any man's temper to read the latter. One way of dealing with the selection problem is to include some of the standard books and be sure of having massy reading for some time to come. Great nature's stereotypes such as Fielding or Sterne, or perhaps better still, Shakespeare, Milton, Boswell, Montaigne, are volumes as packed with information as Macaulay's essays. However, it is often just those books which are available everywhere. I found that my island already contained Richardson's Sir Charles Grandison in many volumes, and a fair selection of the novels of Harrison Ainsworth, Charles Dickens, and Walter Scott, among a surprising number of other interesting books. Having arrived with my small traveling collection, I am now reflecting on those books I ought to have brought instead of those chosen. I often wish for Jane Austen's novels, but I am somewhat comforted to find 50 pages from her work in the World's Classic Anthology. I have with me, again, I could wish to have The Wind in the Willows and the Morte d'Arthur. Although far too bulky, it would have been a comfort to have brought Holbrook Jackson's Anatomy of Bibliomania, since I'm living on an island which is the fabled home of the nymph Calypso. A copy of the Odyssey would have been welcome, but there is no end to these vain wishes. Local sources may be good as far as they go, but they cannot supplant one's own books. Copies which have been acquired slowly, one at a time, over many years, each has its special memory and the former which one likes best, and the format which one likes best. Other people's books are to be read as soon as possible and returned to the owner without delay. One's own volumes are to be lingered over, browsed upon, and reread over and over again. Leigh Hunt liked to have his books all around him and to lean his head against them, and there is a great pleasure in being walled in by one's favorites. My 200 volumes have but a poor showing for this purpose. Yet there have been men of one book. Sir Thomas Aquinas advocated the reading of one book only as a method of becoming learned. But as Robert Southey pointed out, the Homo Unus Libre is formidable in all its conversational figurants and may be something of a bore. We should wish for our whole collection about us as soon as possible. One can increase one's meager stock by further purchases, although the danger is great of buying duplicates of those loved volumes not available. Unfortunately, there are no antiquarian bookshops here, but catalogs sometimes come in by post. I respond to some of them, but generally find that the books have been sold before my letter arrives. In a country new to me, books about the locality may be of interest. but they are a poor substitute for one's favorites. Of more pertinent value may be those dealing with the local flora and fauna. They can well start a new hobby and be a source of great pleasure, but it is unlikely that they will ever supplant the old friends of English literature. It is said that there is no hobby so old, so enduring, or respectable as book collecting. Once a collector, always a collector is our motto, although history has recorded a few renegades. The book collector will certainly miss his treasures if parted from them, and the problem admits of no wide solution, for he must be reunited to them at the earliest possible moment. In the meantime, it seems best that he should enjoy those old friends who travel with him, and if he can borrow them, read thoroughly those tomes which he has always meant to read, but which somehow have escaped him. It is a comfort to think that you will probably benefit greatly from the additional attention given to the new volumes with you, and which, as Dr. Johnson said, you may hold in your hand. But how lucky are the fortunate book lovers who have their treasures all around them. So there ends another essay by Claude A. Prance. And no, I don't know anything about him. I'm going to have to look up to see. Because this is 76, and he seems to have moved to the Mediterranean, according to this, sometime in the 60s. So I'll have to look him up to see. But I've been parted from my books many times. I've actually gone through many collections. Dispersed several collections. When I first came to England, I've mentioned a few times that I didn't intend to buy any books. I didn't want to buy any books. I told myself I wasn't going to buy any books because I didn't want to be, well, I felt that it would be a burden if I wanted to move around, which it is. You can't carry, thousands of books on your back and move willy-nilly. So I had everything arranged. I had thousands upon tens of thousands of PDFs and so forth that I was going to use, and I thought I'll just use the libraries as well to supplement anything else. And then I found that where I am and where I've been, the libraries have been poor substitutes, and the cost for interlibrary loan is more than actually buying a book. So I gave up on that and I started buying books again. But then things went a bit sour for about 3.5, 4 years, that it was up in the air whether I'd have to leave England for not having a permanent job. So I was just eking out. So I had to scale things down. I got rid of about half of the books I had. I kept probably 800 to 1,000 that I had at that time, and I put them in storage thinking, okay, well, these I can't really part with at the moment, and then see what happens. So, and then things turned around, and I moved into here a little over 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago approximately, and I've been adding to ever since. I'd always thought of books as sort of an ace in a hole if I ever became financially stressed. It was always something, you put money into it, but you could always get some money out of it. Unlike going, to pubs and a lot of things that depreciate and disappear, or you have nothing to show for the money, and not having, being hugely affluent in my life. I always thought, well, okay, I enjoy this, and if I ever do get desperate, like I have a few times, I could sell a few books or sell some books to replace some others. However, things changed very quickly about 15, 20 years ago. The bookstores became like used antiquarian bookshops, became fewer and fewer, and nobody really wants to buy books now. And when I was in that situation, 7, 8 years ago, it was a little difficult because nobody wanted to buy the books, or they wanted me to bring all the books to them. And I knew I wouldn't get more than like a few pennies a piece for them if they even took them. So that is changed very much so now. So I know, but even so, I am still an inveterate book collector and reader, and I've said over and over, and it's just space. Space is the biggest thing with books. But anyway, has anybody else been parted by their books for any length of time? And how did they deal with it? And did they actually go out and buy other books and bought duplicates, as Prance has said? I'd love to hear in the comments. Take care, BookTube. Bye.